morning and welcome to Jew in the City Speaks with your host, Allison Josephs, also known as Jew in the City. So the Oscars were last night. Since I'm pre-recording this, I can't tell you how bad they were, but I'm a little bit scared. Last year at the Oscars, Jonathan Glazer had his famous speech that he both made a Holocaust film and renounced his Jewishness. And I noted at the time last year that there was who was the winner? Who was the guy from last year's film who was a proud Irishman? Daniel, help me out. Who was the
For
um
which film?
oh, was it Oppenheimer? Um okay, there was a proud
Cillian Murphy.
yeah, there we go. I can't pronounce his name anyway. He said, I stand up here today as a proud Irishman. And Jonathan Glazer said, I renounce my Judaism. So that was sort of a little bit of a disaster last year, but the Oscars and the Motion Picture Academy have really only shown their anti-Semitism more since then. Since last year, the Motion Picture Academy added in new diversity standards. You need to have certain boxes checked off for a film to be eligible for an Oscar nomination. Jews are not included. We organized a letter last year that got almost 450 signatures of Hollywood insiders, including about 70 top executives and celebrities. The Motion Picture Academy never responded, and this probably got into 12 major news outlets around the world, including the New York Times, Hollywood Reporter, Variety. They did not give a comment to anyone that reached out. Additionally, the Motion Picture Academy organized an event on October 7th, 2024 for new members. Some of the Jewish members said this is a day of mourning for us, and they ignored them. And eventually they changed it, but only after there was public pressure. And then if that wasn't enough, the Motion Picture Academy Museum, the History of Hollywood, first erased Jews and then raised a ton of money to add a new Jewish exhibit, which came out last spring, that was filled with anti-Semitic imagery. So I have not seen the Oscars yet, but I have low hopes. And so we were trying to find some good news to present to you after the Oscars. And so if you were watching last night, there was a commercial made by a good friend of mine, who's an amazing man. His name is Daniel Rosenberg. He is a movie producer, an Orthodox Jew, and he has worked on critically acclaimed films like Inside Man, starring Denzel Washington, directed by Spike Lee, and a whole slew of other really exciting projects. Daniel did not grow up observant, but he became observant sort of in his adult years, and we're going to hear his story today. So Daniel, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Allison.
So yeah, I mean, let's just jump right in. So tell us, I guess, first about your Jewish background. Where did you grow up? How did you grow up Jewishly?
So I grew up in Manhattan and went to, in fact, I think my nursery school was called Community Church. So that should give you a good indication of where I started my life. But there's a great story about that, which is that my best friend from when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, I didn't see after I turned 5. He went his separate ways and we reconnected. We reconnected about 15 years ago. And I walked into Aish and he was a rabbi there and I was there just figuring stuff out and I just knew I knew him from somewhere but I couldn't figure out where and we basically hadn't seen each other in 40 years or even longer and the last time we'd seen each other was in a church or in a building that was named after a church and there we were 40 years later both observant Jews um, and picked our friendship up right where it left off.
Amazing.
And
Okay, so started in a church and then like reform, conservative, like what was the
so I didn't even I would actually went to that church, which during the high holidays they would like cover the crucifix and we would have services there. And then that was on 35th Street and Park. And then years later we went to Temple Emmanuel. I went to Hebrew school there. I was eventually bar mitzvah there. But I mean, going to Temple Emmanuel is like going to, if it's any more reformed, it would have a crucifix, and it was just sort of one of those experiences where I just did not understand what it meant. I knew what it meant to be culturally Jewish, but I had no idea what it meant to be an observant Jew. Really was not exposed to that until much later. And that story is probably way too long for this interview, but it definitely involved, I think, somewhat of a healthy interest in just sort of understanding the world. It had nothing to do with I was very fortunate that I didn't feel like I was really missing anything from my life. I just was more curious as to what the whole meaning of life really was. And I decided to start with Judaism. I realize a lot of people don't. They start with everything but Judaism. But I actually started there. And
How old were you?
um, I guess the real journey started when my daughter was in kindergarten at a secular school, and we started making more and more inroads there. So I would say like in my early to mid 30s.
And was there like sort of a moment that something happened that got you to like go to the first class or meet with the first rabbi? A lot of times there's kind of like the thing that's the catalyst.
Yeah, so I do know that I had a moment on the way to a premiere of a film that I produced, and I remembered being in the car going, okay, so another movie, and I am thinking about, all this pressure and all what's next for me, and I just felt like a hamster in a wheel, and I just thought, well, I haven't really even determined what I'm doing this all for. And
Hmm.
is really my entire life going to be focused mainly on my career, or is there something else that I should be focused on? And it really was an internal monologue around purpose and meaning. And I just said, look, I can't really go through this now. I have to stay in the moment. But I just sort of put a pin in my head and said, all right, you got to come back to this. And my wife and I have a joke. She used to daven that she used to pray that I had rabbis in my life, and I think I we joked that Hashem was probably laughing at her prayer and said, "I'll show you rabbis." And basically, we probably have too many rabbis. No, no such thing. But it was I think that was probably a moment for us where I just found a couple of rabbis that really changed my life that just understood how to straddle the secular world that I was living in and the observant world that they understood and helping me bridge that divide. And anyone who's going on this kind of journey, I would just recommend to go shopping until you find someone that truly understands your world where you come from, but also can help guide you into the into the next world, not that
Beautiful.
world.
Tell me about your movie career. Lots of people want to go into entertainment or,
Right.
be movie producers, but very few actually like do it successfully. Kind of when did this desire start and kind of what were the kind of key moments in your succeeding?
Yeah, I mean, my father was a lawyer. I had a lot of entertainment clients, and he actually encouraged me to go into the business. And back then, the most clear path into the entertainment business was starting in the mailroom at one of the big talent agencies. So I graduated college, and within a month or two, I was in the mailroom, and it was pretty humiliating in New York. My friends all, were working on Wall Street, probably making, 10 times that I was making. And I was literally pushing a mail cart and delivering mail to agents. And, it's great. I think it's character building and all those things. And there's a reason for it. There's a reason why that's the training ground for Hollywood. I mean, there's only one Hollywood, right? You can be in real estate in any city in the world, but if you want to be in the film business, it's a small business. And there's way too many people who want in and way too few opportunities. So paying your dues is a big part of that process, but it's also more than paying your dues, just being exposed to how information flows in the industry and knowing that information is a currency more than money. Information can create great wealth just by knowing Julia Roberts is looking for a romantic comedy, is going to be more valuable to you than with that information and going out and trying to find it for her, right? So I was in the mailroom. I got eventually promoted to being assistant to one of the biggest agents in Hollywood. I worked for her for about 2 years. I was promoted. I was a junior agent, and then I eventually left to start producing movies. I produced my first movie with Steve Martin and Kevin Bacon and Helen Bonham Carter, Laura Dern, called Novocaine. Um, and then I became a studio executive and worked with Julia Roberts' production company at Revolution Studios. We produced movies like Mona Lisa's Smile, Made in Manhattan. And then I produced Inside Man. I produced another movie with Pacino and De Niro and 50 Cent called Righteous Kill. And then we just produced another movie this year, Kangaroo Island, which is coming out soon, hopefully. And, continue to produce television. I would say that the religious aspect of it is that I don't know if I could have had the career I had if I'd been observant earlier. I mean, I know that might be hard for people to hear, but that's the truth. There are a handful of producers that have, I think, successfully made it through as producers. But if you want to be working, if you want to work at the big companies, like working at one of the studios or working at one of the agencies, it's super hard to do that as an observant Jew. Listen, I know there are exceptions because I've met them over the years, but it really is boss dependent because there is an expectation that you're available 24/7.
So can
Um,
I just say that that sort of challenge is something that like our Hollywood Bureau is trying to push back at, that we're in this age of inclusion, of accommodations, and obviously things are kind of getting, you know, turned upside down now in terms of DEI and the new administration. But all that being said, we are living in this new age of trying to include people with different lifestyles and, kind of having a bigger net of who gets to be involved. And that's something that we have spoken to the studios about, that like shouldn't there also be room for people who keep kosher, or who observe the Sabbath, or want to celebrate both days of Rosh Hashanah. So how did some of those conversations look like? Let's try to like meld those two stories together. You have this thought on the way to the film, this is success, and I know that feeling of like I just did something big, kind of like, oh my gosh, what's my next thing? But like, what does that look like from that initial thought to like actually becoming Shomer Shabbos? And then what conversations do you have with your bosses about like outing yourself as like, I'm one of those crazy Jews now?
uh uh, I would say that I mean there's so many great stories along the way of you know making this commitment, not knowing if so the first time my wife first there was a time my wife decided to kosher the kitchen without telling me. I just landed at JFK. I was in LA all week for work. I landed. She's like, "Oh, by the way, I kosher the kitchen." I'm like, "What? Like, don't you think that's a family discussion?" And she's like, "No, if you don't like it, we can always go back." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I get home, and the next morning I see a dairy dish in the meat sink, and I was like, if you know me, I have to do everything right. So when I found it, I was like, this is outrageous. And my wife was loving the fact that I was upset that we weren't doing it right. So I was hooked. So that's the short version of the koshering story. The first Shabbos we decided to keep, well, my wife was trying to get us to keep Shabbos and I wasn't really there yet. And she was like, well, I said, what do you want for, this should give you an indication of where we were religiously. So what do you want for Valentine's Day, which we no longer celebrate? But she's like, I just want you um to keep Shabbos this Friday. So I was like, really? You don't want anything? No dinner, jewelry, nothing? Nope, just keep Shabbos. I was like, okay, done. So I ran the economics of keeping Shabbos, and I'm like, all right, I like it. Little did I so that was like the first time. And then, it happened a few more times that year where instead of various holidays, she just wanted to keep Shabbos. So that was sort of how we got into it slowly a few times over the year. And then the time we decided, okay, this is it. We're keeping Shabbos from this Shabbos on. We get a call from this actress, Katherine Heigl, and she said, "Oh, I'm having a premiere of 27 Dresses in New York tonight. Will you on Friday? Will you guys come?" And my wife gets off the phone and she's like, "Well, what are we gonna do?" And I'm like, "Well, let's ask a rabbi." So we like call up a rabbi and I'm like, "Rabbi, what do we do?" Like, and the Chabad rabbi says, "Well, have you kept Shabbos? Like, is this your first Shabbos that you're gonna keep?" And we're like, "Yeah, this is it." And he's like, "Well, then just start next Shabbos." I'm like, "I love this rabbi. This is amazing." And I was like, "No, I don't think that's what we signed up for. We have to do this." So we're like, called up Katie and said, "Hey, we're not going to be there." And she's like, "Why not?" Well, because we decided to keep shopping. She said, "I think that's amazing." It was her response. She's a she's Mormon. She's definitely a spiritual person. So
Hmm.
that was, and the funny thing is, she's like, well, you'll come to the next one, and we ended up doing that when it wasn't on a Friday. So we that was our first Shabbos was really we were trying to figure out, can we like walk to the movie theater and not have tickets and just sit there, and but realized that wasn't really the spirit. So those were sort of initial moments.
And what about like in workspaces? Like, did it come up like you're just leaving early? I feel like things get more serious on like Fridays in
Yeah.
the winter.
So, yeah, that look, I mean, I was fortunate at that point. I was, I was, it was my company, so I could, just disappear. It was scary. I think one of the first experiences I had early on was that, I was shooting something in LA on a Monday. So I was flying to LA on Sunday. And about 2 hours before Shabbos, I get a call from the manager of the lead actor who decided that his actor was no longer going to be available for the shoot on Monday. And I had hundreds of thousands of dollars in construction happening at that point, and I had no way of pausing or moving the production in the 2 hours I had left, and I was getting on a plane right after Shabbos. So I was in a bind, and I basically said to the manager, he better be there, or we're gonna have to recover the money from you and your team. And he said, well, that's not going to happen. And he won't be there on Monday. And I said, well, I'm not going to be answering my phone after sundown in New York. He was in LA. And I get to shul, and I must have been white because all my friends at shul were like, what happened? I told them the story, like, oh, we're going to daven for you. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll take it, but I'm not sure that's going to be the only answer. And all Shabbos day, the next day, my phone was ringing off the hook, but I wasn't answering it. I knew it was the manager calling, and I didn't know what he was saying. But Motzei Shabbos, right after Shabbos, I pick up my phone. I have the choice whether to listen to the messages from the in the sequential order or reverse order. I decided to listen to them in sequential order, and the first message was, Daniel, I don't know why you're not picking up the phone, but we got to sort this out. Next message, Daniel, look, are you just playing hardball with me? Like, why aren't you picking up? We have this to resolve this. Like 5 messages in, it's Daniel, okay, I get it. You win. He'll be there on Monday. And to this day, I wonder if I had picked it up, would I have gotten the same outcome? And I think it's a great lesson in business, regardless of Shabbos. It's like sometimes just not responding gets you what you want. But in the end, I took it as a real sign from above that Shabbos keeps the Jews.
Totally. I love it. Obviously not every story always ends up so well, but I love the
It
ones that
does.
do.
Every single one, else.
Um, what's it called? We need to just talk about the Oscar commercial since I led with that little
Yes,
teaser.
yes.
So yeah, so tell me about what commercial was featured during the Oscars.
Yeah, so well, this is a fun little story, which is that, and it actually involves Katherine Heigl again, which was that we were looking for a celebrity to work with a brand called Poise, which is part of Kimberly Clark, and it's a female product, let's just say, for light bladder leakage. And uh, we signed Katherine up to a talent deal, and we shot the campaign in December, and we ended up shooting in LA. We shot 3 different spots, one of which is out and got a lot of attention from the press. It was 'cause it was a really cute spot, and it referenced Catherine's old role on Grey's Anatomy. And then we shot this other spot, which will be announced, or which will air for the first time on the Oscars. It's basically, the campaign is really about how women on the subject of light bladder leakage, they don't, even though 1 in 2 women actually experience it, no one's talking about it. It's just a buried subject. And as witnessed by the fact that it was really hard for Poise for years, they tried to find a celebrity willing to talk about it and weren't having much luck. And this camp and the spot is called Whisper, and it really starts off with Catherine just whispering about the issue, and then by the end, she's basically you realize that she's not in a dark room all alone, that she's actually in a restaurant, and she's not afraid to talk about it in public. And it's very personal to her. She actually rewrote the spot in her words, so it's very much her talking to the audience. And it's really, I think, an important piece of advertising, because I think it's going to help a lot of women just get comfortable around this category. And my partner who directed it is famous for having launched the initial Dove work of Dove Real Beauty.
Mhm.
So I think we have quite a bit of a track record in in really reframing a lot of issues around women's health and beauty.
I mean, what I love about this angle, just coming back to your, religious affiliation, is that what we're told often in Hollywood is that the Orthodox man is the woman's subjugator, and you're giving voice to destigmatizing a woman's issues. So that's really awesome. Now we get to the like, what's your advice for people that want to get into the industry? And I guess the second piece, since you said, I mean, you said the Orthodox part is hard. If you're already observant, it's hard. So we'll work on those accommodation things. What about um, what about those Jews now post October 7th that are in the industry that want to get into more Judaism? I feel like there is a fire that has been lit in the bellies of so many Jews. Um, I think in Hollywood, unfortunately, it's a more quiet space. We
Yep.
don't have as many Jews speaking out, as many celebrities, but they exist. So I guess what advice do you have for the Jews that are already, living more committed lives to get into the business? And then what advice do you have for the Jews that are already in the business to get into the Judaism?
Yeah, I guess for the ones that are starting out, I mean, I talk and mentor young people as they try to enter the building and enter the industry, and I would say that the number one, advice I give them is to build a support group. Find like-minded people in the space. Try to, sometimes it's nice to just work with people who understand what support you need. I also find that if you're upfront about it early on, people often respect it. So I do feel like, as you say, I think the world's changed a little bit from when I started, and then people are much more open to this type of thing and more flexible around hours. And look, my attitude for young people is like, as long as you get the work done and you get it done on time, I think you'll get the flexibility you need. But generationally, I think you just have to demonstrate a ability to get the work done, and then a lot of the other stuff falls into place. And and just keep in mind that you're a representative of the Jews, so it's like you have to hold yourself to the highest standards. I think that's another important thing. And then to the Jews that are in Hollywood that are sort of re-inspired or finding their connection to Judaism more and more after October 7th. I'm on a lot of WhatsApp chats, and I know you are, Allison, on some of the chats I'm on, and you definitely see this bonding of industry people. What I'd love to see though is a I think we often mix politics into this, and I think that's a very natural thing to do. But I think never in the history of Judaism has Israel and Zionism been so closely intertwined, and that brings, unfortunately, the politics into the conversation. So, my hope is that we can try to remove some of that from the conversation and really just start to, focus on what makes Judaism so beautiful and such a light to everyone and to the world, and what it's intended to be. And I feel like for the last couple of years, there have been some very unfortunate examples of anti-Semitism in the heart of our industry. And I think you mentioned what the motion picture says,
Yeah.
the museum opening up and the exhibit sort of removing Jews from the equation. And that was a little hard to take, especially since my grandmother was one of the first, she was the secretary to Carl Laemmle, which is the one of the founders of Universal. So like to have a family history very involved in the founding of the film business, and someone who was there at the in the 1920s. And then to just have an exhibit that just completely almost ignores this history. It's just, a really sad state of affairs. And I think like for the Jews that are in the industry that have that influence, that are in positions of power, I think there's a job to be done, which is really to have pride and to embrace and not shy away from all of the and not be embarrassed to embrace all of the accomplishments and all of the many things we've brought to this industry. And that's kind of what I've been working on is my pride, right? Because I think that's very easy to just sort of put that in the background. But I think we have to all make an effort to be loud and proud like a lot of other cultures are. I think, if I look at the Black culture in Hollywood, there's just an immense pride of accomplishments and celebration by other people as a result. And I feel like it's time the Jews, maybe take a lesson there and actually have that type of pride.
1,000%. I mean, I think we're in an age now where every group, thankfully, is leaning in and celebrating who they are. And I think pre-October 7th, there were still a decent amount of Jews kind of feeling embarrassed. I just commented, what's her name? Gwyneth Paltrow did a video with Chloe from SNL. I can't remember her last name. You'll fill me in
I
on
don't
that
know.
one. Yeah, about Chloe's father. Both of them have Jewish fathers and non-Jewish mothers, and Chloe's father would it say, dress British, think Yiddish. And they both express pride in their Jewish side and sort of have very warm connections, which is beautiful that they express that. But what I commented on the video is that dress British, think Yiddish is really a form of self-erasure if you're a Jew. It's that you can't bring your full Jewish self out to the world.
Yep.
And I said, in today's age of celebrating who you are, really what the new updated phrase should be, dress Yiddish, think Yiddish. And if that makes you uncomfortable to dress Yiddish and think Yiddish, ask yourself why. And I
Yeah.
think we need to kind of unpack those feelings and stop being afraid and stop being embarrassed. Um, well, Daniel, I have to just say that like I've known you for years and I didn't know how cool you were. So
Yeah.
thank you so much
As do I.
for so thank you so much for sharing your story. Hashem should continue to bless you with success and being this inspiration in Hollywood.
Man, and you too, Allison, and congrats on everything you do and are doing. We're doing the city because I think all of us are marveling at how you have taken over the industry in your own special way and making a big mark. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much. And thanks so much for listening. You can catch us same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.